Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Andy Campbell and this is 12 and a half minutes, brought to you by Elevator, one of Scotland's leading entrepreneurial and business support organisations. This is now week number 10 for 12 and a half minutes, and each week we are joined by some of the very best entrepreneurs, pioneers, adventurers and heroes that we can find across the UK and in fact across the globe. So it's fantastic that we're joined today by one man who really is all of these things. He's an entrepreneur, he's a pioneer, adventurer, and of course, a hero. He really does embody it all. Our guest holds numerous world records. He has cycled round the world twice, no less, and has also done one of those occasions in 79 days, one of the fastest. He has cycled the Americas. He's cycled from Cairo to Cape Town, but he's not just renowned for his cycling. He has also rode to the magnetic North Pole and attempted an Atlantic crossing, which nearly cost him his life. So I'm delighted to extend a very warm welcome to endurance athlete Mark Beaumont. Mark.
Thanks, Andy, and warm welcome to anyone joining us or catching up after the. If you happen to be watching that countdown timer beforehand, it took me back 20 years to being a barman in the Mardi Gras in Dundee, and I commend the choice of music by Elevator. By way of brief background to who I am, went to school in Dundee. Spent my formative years in rural Perthshire. I was homeschooled till the age of 12. Graduated from Glasgow University with an economics and politics degree, but decided to take that in a completely different direction. So I set out around the planet for the first time, and that's an 18,000 mile race, which got made into a 4-part BBC documentary called The Man Who Cycled the World. And 15 years ago, that launched my career as a broadcaster and as a filmmaker. And those films and those journeys have now taken me to about 130 countries around the planet, and always in the pursuit of firsts, of fastest, and trying to really push the envelope as an athlete. But my early years in Glasgow were very much shaped by working with what is now the Saltire Foundation, Entrepreneurial Scotland, going over and doing an internship in Boston and getting access to that global Scot network, people, influential and successful Scots living and working around the planet. And I've been a part of that ecosystem ever since, and really passionate about making a difference, not just with my own life, but other people working to make the Scottish entrepreneurial system a more interesting and diverse place. So people know me for riding a bike, but I've held roles at the University of Dundee when I stepped down recently as rector, and I stay involved with the Centre for Entrepreneurship there. I'm a partner in an innovation fund, an early stage tech, science and engineering business, trying to nurture great ideas coming out of Scottish universities. And I've had the pleasure of working with Elevator at a couple of their events. So in a few brief moments, that's been my life so far.
Great, Mark. Thanks so much. And like a true professional, you carried on, because I don't know if you noticed, but we had a big technical glitch there and I actually get kicked out the system, but I'm now back. And if it wasn't for your fantastic introduction there, Mark, you might have been wondering where I had gone, but thanks for covering the gaps, and thanks to the team behind the stages to keep calm. So, I'm back, Mark. Thanks so much for that introduction. So, Mark, obviously, we know you in terms of the pioneering activity that you have undertaken, those huge mammoth journeys that you've gone on. And I think one of the key things that we're keen to touch on in this particular interview is the physical and mental endurance that it takes just to do what you have done, Mark, and really you have done some spectacular things in your time. But I want to just find out a little bit about what your mindset is when you start to think about a new adventure, a new journey. What do you do from a mental point of view to prepare, and what do you do from a practical point of view to prepare, Mark?
I've been asked for an opinion on this quite a lot in the last 3 months, because I know lockdown is not something that any of us chose to do, but just dealing with just the ability to endure, cope with massive uncertainty, communicate remotely, all the skill sets that allow us to be effective and not just sort of wish time away, but actually be productive during this time is kind of similar to an expedition mindset. So the hardest thing before I start any major project is just building belief around me that these things are possible. Because I'm by definition trying to do things that have not been done before, it's impossible simply because there's no reference point. So that emotional leadership, just giving, I might not have the bandwidth and the capacity and the skill set to do the entire project, but I've got to at least, if I smile, everyone smiles. If I look worried, my team look worried, because I'm the person that at the end of the day is setting them all up to task. So I think just that ability to communicate effectively and get people on board with a passion and an idea is kind of at the heart of it. How you think yourself. The endurance mindset for me, and anyone who gets good at endurance, and anyone involved in business or sport, at the end of the day, you've got to be endurance mindset. You get very fixated on what you're trying to do, what that end goalpost is, and then you get entirely obsessed in the road you can see, the road you can ride. The period of time that exists between now and then is like a giant accordion. It might as well disappear into nothing because it doesn't exist until you get there. So people get freaked out by the never-endingness, the sheer battle of attrition around projects. Look at the last 3-4 months with COVID and what it's done to all of our businesses. So if you focus on the road that you can see, the horizon you can affect, it makes you a lot more productive, and then you know where you're trying to get to, but ultimately you don't get lost in that middle ground too much. Sure, there's moments of time for strategy, but normally you give up mentally long before the rug's actually pulled from under your feet, just because you think, how can I keep going for that period of time? You don't have to. You just need to ride the road in front of you.
Yeah, and I think ultimately that's getting your mindset into that position. But then when you actually start the activity itself, when you start to push down that pedal for the very first time, Mark, that's going to have a huge physical impact on you. It's really going to test your physical endurance, and it's going to deprive you of sleep. It's going to put you under stress. Fatigue is going to be a feature, and I dare say probably even fear, Mark. So what's your coping mechanisms for performing under that pressure?
Well, I mean, I think there'll be a lot of people involved, in this call and others that you do, who are shouldering a lot of leadership responsibility. And I always talk about the fear of failure being a massive driver. Now, the fear of failure doesn't mean that you're negatively motivated is a bad thing. It just means you're accountable. So if I build a team, if I build a project, put finance behind something, and I'm trying to do something which there's no reference point for, that is very scary. And I can be inspired by what I want to do, but it's not in the moment the thing that you're thinking about. So if I'm pedaling out around the planet, which is 18,000 miles, if I'm in the middle of the outback in Australia, I've just crashed, I've got a headwind, things are going wrong, that end goal is so distant and something I can't actually affect that, all the KPIs for my team and all the things I'm feeding myself are not related to that. It's just the accountability to keep working through the process. You're focused on the inputs, not the outputs. So I'd say you get completely, daunted by the scale. So I think talking about the carrot and the stick is quite useful. I'll always remember riding out of Mongolia on that last round the world when Alex, one of my team, turned to me and he said, "Mark, we're going to do this." And I laughed and I said to Alex, who had now worked with me for the best part of a year, I said, "Alex, at what point did you not think we were going to do this?" So if you just bang on about what you're trying to do and like the overall success in your project, you'll lose your own motivation and you'll actually lose the belief in your team because it's so intangible. It's so beyond the horizon you can affect. So it kind of goes, it links us beautifully with that first question you asked, Andy. You've got to have the fear of failure. You've got to be accountable. You've got to realize that every period of time matters, and then the law, the way averages actually work, you can't affect that big equation. You can just be ruthlessly consistent and trust that the long-term average will take care of itself. And it's massively useful in periods of turmoil like this because it stops us just sort of putting a line through the diary and saying it doesn't matter. It does matter. You just get focused on the things you can affect and write it down on a bit of paper. I can mitigate them, I can not affect them, and these are directly within my control. And then you've got a way of operating effectively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think having that longer term perspective, that end goal that you're driving towards will take you and the rest of your team along that journey. But
Yeah.
you will be challenged, and I know in terms of some of the things that you've embarked upon and the challenges that you've had along the way. You've been in a collision. You were knocked over. I think you were robbed later on that day. You've suffered illness. These are really very personal challenges and setbacks. But what gets you over those individual hurdles that come along? Is it just that longer term perspective that you take?
I mean, look, I've been in some horrible situations. I've capsized in the middle of the Atlantic. I've, smashed my face up. I've broken my arm. And kept going. But you know what? I think we've all got a pretty good fight or flight mechanism. I think it's human nature when our livelihood, when our work, when our everything we've worked towards is derailed. I think we all fight back pretty strongly. So I actually challenge the fact that these crisis points are our hardest challenge, because we all have the ability to fight hard in the short term when it matters most. And it's just, it's just what happens. It's a physiological response to the fear of losing everything you've got. I think what's harder in leadership, much harder, is just breaks on progress, things which are not quite right, just sort of becoming an excuse monger for things which, you could control, but you don't, because you just don't want to have those difficult conversations. So small things make up massive differences over the course of time. And I'm far, in leadership, whether it's in leading an expedition or, shaping an early stage business, I'm always talking about, look, I trust you in a crisis. I really do. I think we've all got the ability to fight back when our livelihood's at stake. But have we got the quiet confidence to put ourselves in the driving seat and call out just the brakes on progress, the things which aren't quite right, quite often the human dynamics, which we can live with, but they don't seem to be that annoying in any given day. But over the course of a couple of weeks, months, years, they're going to take you to a completely different place. I always stressed with the pedal around the planet, if we faffed, it's a technical term, if we faffed for 5 minutes every time I got off the bike, that would add a day to the world record. Yeah. So let's stop talking about making the bike go faster and just make sure I'm on the bike at 4 and not 4. And if somebody in the team is the reason I'm not on the bike at 4 and not 4, change the person in the team. I'm absolutely ruthless. I'm bring on talent, give people opportunities, but place accountability with everyone on the team. It's not that doesn't just sit with the leadership. That sits with everyone to be consistent. All the KPIs in my projects, they're not around knocking it out of the park in any given day or being brilliant. It's about being consistent, because with that, you've got, where your job finishes and another one starts, and gives you wonderful peace of mind. People think smashing world records is about training hard, and then when you get out there, figuring out what's possible. That's the romantic notion of breaking records. Same in business. Here's the truth, the very boring truth. You write a plan and you read it off script.
Yeah.
So no part of going around the world in 80 days was about figuring out what we could do. We broke the world record by 37%. Yep. We broke our target by 1.44%. You'll never do better than what you set out to do. So figure it out, adapt. Stuff's going to go wrong. COVID's going to hit. Things are going to happen that are going to derail your project. But if you don't have a script to read off, if you don't know what you're responsible for, then it's very, very hard to have that consistency around the things you can affect. And, whether you look at, early stage businesses, or you look at, pioneering, feats of endurance, it's the same language. It's the same thing.
Yeah, and certainly, you've touched on that previously. Those sort of marginal gains, those micro habits that you take, and you say if you're 5 minutes late off a bike, then the cumulative effect of that is going to put you way off of track. So it's about the little things that you do each day or each moment that really count and can add up, both positively and negatively. I guess as we kind of look over the horizon then, Mark, and as we're nearing the end of our 12 and a half minutes with you, it'd be good to get a sense of what the next chapter for you is likely to be, and how you can take the mindsets and the learnings that you have into the next chapter of your career, Mark.
Well, I'm pretty clear in terms of, what makes me happy. And at the end of the day, you've got to be selfish about life and say, well, if I'm going to create positive impact in the world, I've first and foremost got to be in a good place mentally. I've got a young family. I've got 2 daughters, 6 and 4. I sort of the way I sort of map out life is quite simple. There's three spheres. There's work, there's community, and there's family. And it's very easy, especially in our professional lives, to get entirely lost in our work. And then we realize that we're not connected to our local community or national or global community. We're not making a positive impact out there. And, family can suffer too. So, there's a wonderful moment in time right now when we can redress that balance, and making sure in each period of time we're creating time to create impact in those three spheres. So that's the broadsheet answer. The concise one for me going forwards is I'll continue to have an athletic life and make films and travel when we're allowed to. I'm writing my 5th book at the moment, which is on the topic of endurance. And as I say, I've got a real passion for entrepreneurship, especially here in Scotland. And I've got 3 distinct ways of channeling that at the moment through my being a patron for the Saltire Foundation, involvement with Entrepreneurial Scotland, being an ambassador and keen supporter for the Centre for Entrepreneurship in Dundee, and then in terms of personal investments and network, building the syndicate and the fund that we have with EOS, because then we've got 12 early stage businesses at the moment, and that will scale over the years. So I'm looking 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, and just thinking, what do I want Scotland to look like, not just for myself, but also for my kids after me.
Yeah. Well, listen, Mark, thank you so much indeed for your time, and thanks for covering at the start of the interview. That was greatly appreciated. I think a lot of the companies that we work with, a lot of those founders will really take heart from a lot of those key messages that you were able to touch upon in today. And I'm sure we will all be following the continuation of your career, whether you're embarking on another huge worldwide adventure or getting involved with more involved with the entrepreneurial community within Scotland. And obviously we see you at the University of Dundee at the Centre for Entrepreneurship, and we thank you for your support there also, Mark. So it's been a real pleasure speaking with you this afternoon. We wish you all the very best indeed, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, team.
Great. Well, thank you, Mark, for joining us. Such a remarkable story. And for those that perhaps don't know too much about Mark and his endeavours that he's had over the last decade or so, please do take time to research a truly inspiring individual that will have you really thinking about your approach to your business, to your life, and how you go about embarking on the challenges that life and business throws at us. So thanks, Mark, for joining us, and thanks also for our audience for bearing with us as we've had a few technical issues here today. We are broadcasting live on Facebook, on YouTube, and also on LinkedIn. So please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. So next week, let me just get my notes here. Next week, we're going to be digging deep into the world of coaching and mentoring top teams with one of Scotland's leading entrepreneurs and experts at doing just that. Mr. Brian Williamson. So looking forward to speaking with Brian next week for 12.5 minutes. But in the meantime, please have a fantastic weekend and be brave.